Hi, everyone. We'll be starting here in just a minute. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amy Bryant from Earlham College, and I'll be the moderator for this session titled Prompted to Action, ChatGPT, Generative Essay Prompts, Library Instruction, and Developing Information Literacy. Before we begin, we have a few reminders. We have a code of conduct that we will adhere to for this conference. The link is posted in chat for that code. If you experience any issues related to contact, please contact us via email by the link that's in the chat. Please be sure your microphone is muted. During the Q&A, please wait until you're invited to unmute before you ask your question or make your comment. You may also use chat for questions. This session is being recorded. You can enable captions by clicking the Show Captions button at the bottom of the screen. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers, Stacy Johnson, Diana Kim, Hannah Menendez, and Aaron Owens from Sam Houston State University. And I'm going to turn it over to them now. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. So we are all here from Sam Houston State University. We're all involved in research and instruction here. And we're going to be talking a little bit about how we've used ChatGPT in instruction in the past and what we're looking at with some of the rapid change in generative AI and its use in library instruction going forward. Let's see, Stacy, okay, we're going to do the opening poll, I think. So hopefully someone can paste this in the chat. Whoops. I'm sorry. We've got a QR code on the screen here that you can use for this opening poll, or the link is in the chat. And we've got just two questions that we're going to ask you to answer to give us a sense coming in of everyone's familiarity with using generative AI in library instruction contexts in particular. So I'm going to give you just a moment to snap that QR code or follow the link in the chat. And I'm going to show the results here as they're starting to come in. So this first question is asking you about your experience using large language models, generative AI in library instruction specifically. And it looks like so far we're right around the midpoint. We've got a lot of people who have maybe looked at it or thought about it just a little bit, kind of aware of people doing this, but maybe not a lot of people on the heavy implementation end. Oh yes, Michael says in the chat, dabbled. That's a good word for it, dabbled. Right, and the second question, asking for words or phrases that come to mind when you're considering incorporating ChatGPT in library instruction. So I'm seeing things like literature search, plagiarism, confusing, that's good, premature, bias, learning curve, elephant in the room, yeah. disagreement, misunderstanding, making things easier, starting point, possibility. Okay, these are great. I think this is really a great starting point, helping to highlight both sides of what we're talking about here in terms of possibility and concerns. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move off those survey answers and pull our slides back up. And Hannah, I believe I'm handing it over to you for the first section.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Hey, everyone. So just kind of as a starting point, a little preamble to the rest of what we're going to be talking about in this session, I'm going to start off by talking about what we've already done to use generative AI in library instruction. So this is just an example of one thing that we've done so far that was attempting to include some AI literacy along with our usual library instruction learning objectives. So about a year ago, each of us taught one section of a single instructor's Composition 2 course, which was a course focused on conducting undergraduate research. It's one that most of us probably teach a lot of composition classes if we're instruction librarians. So this was kind of our standard run-of-the-mill ask, but this professor wanted us to actually teach 2 sessions in 1 week for each section. The first one was a very basic library demo. The second was focused on information literacy. So we wanted to try to do something a little bit different in the second session. And we had watched a webinar together about using generative AI in library instruction. And so we saw an opportunity to increase student and faculty awareness of generative AI, as well as AI literacy, and just general information literacy with the session using active learning. So what we did is we generated essays in ChatGPT-3 using very simple research question prompts, sort of your standard freshman composition essay research questions like, should colleges allow vaping on campus, that kind of thing. And with our prompts, we also added a request into ChatGPT for peer-reviewed journal citations to be included at the end of the essay. The students at that point completed a 2-step activity in that second session. So first they looked at the generated list of peer-reviewed citations and they tried to do a known item search in the library discovery tool with an emphasis here on tried, since many of the citations ChatGPT simply made up, which was the kind of the point of that exercise, was to see that those citations were hallucinated. The second thing that they did was go through each essay and highlight claims that needed citations, and then searched in our library discovery tool for sources that would support those claims. So this had them practice both that known item searching and the topical search strategies they learned in the first session, while also learning how to critically analyze AI generated information. Okay, the next slide there. Oh, you went one ahead. There we go. Thanks. So just to kind of give you a little idea of how this activity worked out, the feedback was mostly positive on these sessions. A few of the sessions included a feedback survey with written comments from the students. We had several comments of things like, I didn't know how bad ChatGPT was, which was pretty funny to read. And then anecdotally, the instructor informed some of us after each session that she found the session very helpful and interesting and thought the students benefited. But the main benefit, in our opinion, of doing this activity was having the students think critically about their own information-seeking behaviors and using what they already know about conducting research to learn about ChatGPT's potential limitations. So this was a year ago, and there have already been a lot of changes to ChatGPT and as well as to the generative AI field. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Diana now to talk about those changes.
No, actually, I think I'm doing the next section. Okay. So we wanted to start by looking at ChatGPT specifically as one particular tool. And it has introduced so many new capabilities just since it started in late 2022. They added browsing capability, and it is important to note that this is only for the paid accounts. So the Plus users now have access for ChatGPT to browse the web as part of the chat. The free version is still only limited to what it was trained on and does not have access to that web browsing. So that was in sort of the first half of 23 that they introduced that. Then summer of 23, they introduced custom instructions. And essentially, this allows you to tell ChatGPT a little bit more about who you are, your context, your goals in using it. and tell it a little bit more about how you want it to behave when it responds to you so that you can customize the kinds of responses that you're going to get from it. And hopefully that will improve your use of it. That one was released for paid users first, but is now also available for free users. Then they launched voice and images. Voice allows you to speak aloud to communicate with ChatGPT and to receive its answers spoken aloud as well. Voice has been rolled out to free users as well as paid right at the very end of 23, basically. Images allows you to upload an image that you're basically showing something to ChatGPT and asking it to interpret that image or provide you back some kind of information based on that image. That's still available only to the paid users. Also in very late 23, they introduced custom GPTs. This is sort of related to custom instructions, but goes beyond this. This is combining instructions and any kind of extra knowledge that you want ChatGPT to learn from, other things to be in its training database, and any kind of specialized skills to create sort of a unique version of ChatGPT for a specific purpose. And we'll take a look at just a moment in some examples of that. And then lastly, the newest capability that ChatGPT has released just this April is what they call memory. So ordinarily you start a new chat and it's kind of a blank slate. But with memory implemented, ChatGPT can remember things across your conversations with it. So in theory, it will give you answers that are better informed by its past conversations with you. But then you also have some amount of control to instruct it to remember or forget specific things that you may want to influence its responses or not want to influence its responses. So looking at a few examples of these capabilities, this is a look at what the custom instructions does. So I can tell it a little bit about where I work, what my job is, some topics that relate to my responsibilities, tell it about my goals, basically let it know more about why am I here and what am I trying to do. Then I can also tell it more about itself. I can let it know whether it should be more professional or more casual when it talks to me, how neutral or opinionated I want it to be, things like that. So this gives us some measure of control over how it responds. This is more of a look at the custom GPT piece, which paid users can create these. Free users can simply use the ones that have been created, but not create new ones. You can see there's an entire category of custom GPTs that have been created in research and analysis. So we've got things here like a PDF reader or a Scholar AI that's supposed to help you search and analyze text, figures, and tables from 200 million plus research papers and books. You can see I did a few keyword searches here in the existing custom GPTs, searched for librarian and for information evaluation to get a sense of what kinds of bots have people already created that might be sort of intended to work in this space of what a librarian might do or work in this space of providing information evaluation. So you can see there's already a lot of development here. There's a news and fact checker bot and this research navigator bot. So this is some of the other pieces that are evolving here that I think are really, really critical for us to be paying attention to in terms of how we respond to generative AI with our library instruction. Beyond just the ChatGPT tool itself, some of the other developments and kind of evolving situations that we're seeing, there is a lot of concern about to what extent the development of these tools is emphasizing security, transparency, setting up guardrails. And there's a quote here from a particular employee from OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, who's saying that they don't feel like they signed up for the company's attitude of let's just put things out into the world, see what happens, and fix them afterwards. So we're seeing a lot of these kinds of warnings and concerns around the way that these tools are being developed. We're also seeing a lot of integration into our library space. So to whatever extent that we try to encourage students to rely on library resources as a more credible and research-focused area, that kind of thing. We need to be aware that the generative AI environment is creeping in and infiltrating that library database environment as well. So we're seeing tools like Scopus and Dimensions that are beginning to integrate these Gen AI features, including things like summarizing articles and synthesizing sets of research. So it's starting to infiltrate into our library space, but of course, it's also heavily prevalent outside of our library space. And what we're seeing is that more of those tools that exist outside the library are starting to incorporate things that we would think of as being in the library database space, right? So the ability to search content that is specifically curated scholarly content, and also that ability to provide synthesized answers with citations. So a lot of students we're going to see are more able to do these kinds of tasks without coming into the library and still get that scholarly content. And even when they do come into our databases, they're going to be seeing this infiltration of these Gen AI features. A couple other points I just wanted to make here about seeing the growth in the use of generative AI in the workplace. We see that increasing numbers of companies are either already leveraging AI or thinking ahead about how they will be leveraging AI. So we know that students, as they finish public school, finish college, and move into the workforce, they're going to need to know about these things. We can't pretend that this is something we can just tell them to ignore. And even looking at these responses from college-bound high school students, I found this really interesting that students coming out of high school and heading into college, many of them are already using generative AI, but many of them have concerns. They're using it, but they're worried about whether it's going to give them misinformation. They're worried about how it might impact their critical thinking skills. So I think taken together, this data really shows that we as librarians have a place in addressing these tools, helping our students to engage with them and to engage with them thoughtfully and really kind of learn their strengths and weaknesses and how to leverage them. Impacts on information seeking. We're really seeing some pros and cons both that are developing here. On one hand, when we see expanding capabilities for things like voice communication with Gen AI, this means that students with different needs, maybe a student with dyslexia, maybe it's easier for them to get information by speaking aloud and then processing the responses orally rather than visually. So there could be some benefits there. But we can also see some downsides. A study done this year, published this year by Sharma, Lau, and Zhao, found that participants doing searches with LLM-powered conversational speech, they tended to do more biased queries, more biased searching, and then whatever kind of opinions the LLM reflected just sort of reinforced their views and exacerbated the bias of their searching. So we see definitely that these AI tools can create or exacerbate echo chambers. All right, and now I'm going to pass it to Diana.
Thank you, Erin. All right, so we know that our students are using AI in academic work, and that's going to continue, of course, as more students become aware of it, but as more tools become developed, we're going to see more and more students getting on board and using those things. And obviously there's, ethical ramifications when there's a blur between the work generated by AI and the work that's generated by the student. One of the things that the librarians, we can do is navigate students through that process. So that's one thing that we can be aware of and help our students try to keep, what they're doing ethical, use it as a tool, but not as a generator for their actual academic work. But in addition to that, there are some things that we can do as librarians to leverage AI. And so on the screen here, you're seeing some key trends in AI use for library instruction that I want to talk to you about in this presentation. Some ways that librarians can leverage AI is to help students develop research questions and topics. One of the things that I notice, especially with my introductory students, is that they don't even know where to begin. It's like, how do I come up with a topic, let alone a research question, something that I'm going to address for my audience? ChatGPT is a nice place for students to do a bit of thinking and brainstorming and sort of kicking the tires, if you will, with getting involved in that introductory piece of exploration. So it's great for that. And then once you have some ideas, refining those searches, broadening, narrowing, and exploring related areas is also something that ChatGPT can be very good for. I find especially that students and my sessions are more they're just better when students come in. They're more effective. That's the word I was looking for. When students come into the session with a known research question that they want to explore, before I get into how to use databases and all of that kind of stuff. And many times professors will bring the students in and they're like, I don't know what to do. One of the things that you can do is use ChatGPT very quickly with the students, have them engage with it to do a little idea generation, so that at least when you're going through the session, they've got some areas that they're actually going to, or an area that they're going to explore, so that's a little bit more effective. So you can use it very quickly in under 5 minutes to kind of get the ball rolling, so to speak, as far as getting them involved in that initial piece. And then, of course, students can also use ChatGPT for brainstorming keywords and synonyms. Um, you know, um, Many of them, I try to tell them, you can use a thesaurus and things like that. And they're like, well, whatever. But this is something that you can just simply put into ChatGPT, give me some synonyms for X word, and it'll just give you a list. So it's nice and it's handy for that as well. Yeah, so next slide, please. So we can go beyond some of this introductory stuff, though, and start getting into some critical thinking exercises with our students to help them develop those skills that they're going to need as they make their way through their academic careers. Because generative AI can be very much inaccurate in places, evaluating information for credibility is very important. And librarians can design critical thinking skills to get students involved in really thinking about the information that they're seeing coming from these generative AI tools, so that they can understand or gain a deeper understanding of information sources and recognize biases as well as factual errors. So one of the ways you can do this is by using a concept called lateral reading, where students are really going outside the four corners of the document and going into other places to verify information. The one thing that students need to be aware of is that they cannot take information that's generated by a generative AI tool or ChatGPT specifically at face value. They need to go outside of that document to verify or um, you know, um, make sure that the information that they're seeing in front of them is actually accurate. Now, this can be as simple as starting out with a Google search, like if there's an information piece presented where a person's name is included, just to verify that that person exists is a starting point. But we would really like our students to go deeper than that and go into our library databases to verify specific information that is presented. To either verify or discredit that information. And of course, we have citation verification. As Hannah talked about at the beginning of the presentation, when we had ChatGPT generate information as well as citations, many of those citations were factually inaccurate. And so you can use your library databases to inform students how to use your library's journal finder to verify those sources. So they get some skills in not only evaluating the content of maybe the text of the information, but also how to do a known title search, for example, which they can then use in the future. And then also, once they verify, let's say a source is accurate, to go into that source, read the abstract or maybe a portion of the document to verify that the information is, in fact, that's coming out of your generative AI tool is accurate in terms of what was actually presented in the article. So it gives them a couple of different things that they can be looking at. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so there are a number of tools that we're finding are out there that students can use for research. And for purposes of this presentation, I'm not going to go through all of these and explain like the details about what they do. This gives you just a sort of a bulleted list of kind of what's main things that some of these do. But but I think it's important that we as librarians become aware that these exist and kind of start dabbling, as someone said earlier in the presentation, with these, so we can become familiar with how they work. For example, this spring, I had a research consultation with a student, and she told me that she was using ChatGPT, or not, sorry, she was using Research Rabbit for her research. And not only was she using Research Rabbit, her professor told her she should use Research Rabbit. And at the time, I didn't know what that even was. And so I was sort of at a loss. I didn't know anything about the tool. I didn't know how it worked. I didn't know its limitations. And so I felt like I was at a disadvantage in helping her. I couldn't just say, well, don't use this, because I didn't know enough about it to explain some of the intricacies. So I think it's important that, because we know that our students are dabbling out there with these products, to kind of get in there and start looking at how they function, so that when we are confronted with that information, we can advise them in a meaningful way. Go ahead to the next slide, please. So this last slide that I'm going to present basically came from findmyaitool.com. If you haven't had an opportunity to look at these various resources or these tools, it's a nice resource for taking a brief look at what each of these do. It gives you a little bit of information about that, but it also, and for many of these, provides sort of a bulleted list of pros and cons. So even if you don't have a lot of time to get in there and really see how they work, you can see immediately, like, okay, here are some potential benefits as well as some potential limitations. So for our Research Rabbit example, one of the things that's a con is that it doesn't cover all the relevant sources or databases for a research topic, or maybe even provide accurate summaries of long or technical papers. So the one thing that I would want to be telling my student in my previous example is that, look, this is one place that you can be looking for information, but don't assume that you're going to have everything available to you that has been generated. We really need to go into our library databases to supplement that information. And I think for all of these, without going through them one line by line, you can see many of them have inaccuracies as a problem. And so that is one thing that students really need to be aware of. And I think that's what we need to be aware of as well, so that we can provide that information and help them navigate through that. Because students think it's a one-stop shop. They're going to have everything they need and everything's great. But for the most part, that is not usually not the case for most of these. So just sort of bear that in mind. But I think bottom line is, we just have to make sure that we're in the know so that they can be in the know. And with that, I'm going to pass you to Stacy so that we can talk about actively incorporating ChatGPT in your library instruction.
Hi, I'm going to go ahead and briefly talk about this, and that way we have a little bit of time possibly for a short brainstorming activity. We've talked about incorporating ChatGPT, but I think the main and most important thing to remember is we need to do this in an active way. So I've listed out, just talking about what we said, the increase in interactions between humans and AI. Our students are going to have to be able to examine these ideas and output and work, as you will, collaborators. With universal design for learning, which is what we have kind of based our processes on, students of all levels and familiarity with technology can be accommodated through engagement, representation, action, and expression. This means leveling the playing field, perhaps, for folks who may not have as much experience with the technology. If we group them, we allow them to check these things out with their peers. We provide guidance. This helps them to be able to engage with it, to be able to feel like they can take action. And then we also take this constructivist learning approach, because we really want to focus on engaging the learners and constructing their own knowledge. So this is really a key part of this, because we can give them these activities, and then we're providing them opportunities to hone their information literacy and critical thinking skills. And I mean, I was driving down the highway this morning to work, and there's a AI controlled truck on the road. So we know these things are going to be interacting with people. We know we're going to have to work with them. So we definitely want to focus on that in our instructional practices. Next slide, please. So we're going to briefly give you guys a breakout opportunity. I know we're running low on time. We have a Padlet we've designed for you guys. Once we break you up, click on the link for the number of the group that you're in. It'll give you a chance to post a few things potentially and some questions. Go ahead and next slide, please. This is the guide for what we want you guys to look at, making sure you are understand your institutional context. Are we looking to help graduate students hone their research, management skills? Are we looking at undergrads, right? And then we want to talk about our outcomes, right? What do we want these students to be able to do when they get finished in this instruction space? And then we want to incorporate ChatGPT into instruction possibly, right? And then at the final, we hope that you guys will have some ideas for incorporating active learning, making sure you're using these programs alongside the students. So if you will, we're going to break you up for just a second for you guys to kind of consider these things and brainstorm in groups.
Good afternoon. Hello. I cannot hear. I don't know. It's strange.
Sorry, we opened breakout rooms. We've got everybody going into breakout rooms to chat. That's why we're being quiet for the moment.
Oh, okay.
Are you seeing an invitation for a breakout room?
Yeah, I did. I click on join. Okay.
Let's see. Trying to see if I can see how to do this.
I think you should be getting another invitation now. I just tried to move you.
Could you see if someone from group 6 is asking for help?
Oh, okay. I'm not seeing that. Where are you seeing that?
I got a pop-up that said Joseph Dunn in room 6 asked for help.
Oh, okay.
Do you want me to just try to pop in really quick?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm not seeing.
Okay, I'll pop in.
And I think Sung Kyung Lee made it into room 2, it looks like.
Okay, good. Thanks. We're not used to doing breakout rooms with this many people.
Exactly. It's a
lot,
great
yeah.
turnout. You guys are doing a great job.
Thank you.
Oh, should I pause the recording?
Maybe so, yeah.
We'll just
Yeah,
All right.
I started the recording back up.
All right. I'll go ahead and close the rooms and give everybody a few seconds to get back to the main room.
And I'll tell them they can continue to add to that Padlet. Those links will stay live.
Yeah.
So if anybody was really wanting to add some things and maybe didn't get a chance. You can advance to the next slide if you'd like.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Oh, keep going. There we go.
They've got about another 20 seconds before they're all booted back to the main room.
Okay. Are you all back in, Aaron?
Yeah, I think we should all be back in.
Okay, I know that was a little brief and maybe you didn't get a chance to delve in as much as you could, but we will be leaving this Padlet open and we'll share links along with our slides so that you're able to go back in there possibly and review, and then we'll archive it and make it available. But just briefly to wrap up, guys, again, we want to focus there on those outcomes of learning, what they need to know, learn, or be able to do. And then also, we know you probably have remaining reservations based on our chats with folks. It is something that is nebulous, it's ever evolving. So we want you guys to consider, face your fear, right? Like, what are some issues and how can you potentially use these tools to solve it? So on our next slide, I think we have a very brief overview, recap, guys, just basically serving them, prompting them to interact with ChatGPT, understanding these opportunities through instructional activities to highlight our quality collections like we've discussed, and then potential benefits that we can play that pivotal role that Diana, I think, touched on, that we incorporate these advancements into instruction, guiding their use, just like we have with other novel information resources in the past. So in closing, guys, we appreciate you so much. We do have a final poll for you, and it's also going to be a QR code, and I believe we'll add the chat link there. Hannah, if you've got that.
It's in there.
Okay, awesome. So if you guys feel free to share thoughts on this poll very briefly, just to get us closed out. And I'm interested to see if anybody has any changed perspectives now that they've kind of come through this. No, here, I can share screen if you need me to. Okay, good. Citation verification, sure, that's a great way to do that. Fallibility and keywords, yeah, our students need that so much. Great, I'm glad you guys like the shares we had. So everybody is sharing, and then yeah, use with caution. Great, great deal. Curious, excited, good. We definitely want you guys to feel empowered and feel like you're able to do this, you know, because that's our bread and butter, citations, access, resources. We all are in a great position for this, whether we feel like it or not. Okay, so you guys be brave. Yay. All right. I appreciate you guys. We have I guess our reference list at the end of our slides, and wanted to just make sure everybody had a chance if they had a question. I think we have a few in the chat.
Yeah, and we will be posting our slides in the Zoom event space after our presentation, so you'll be able to get back to our references if you'd like. So let's see, we do have a couple questions. I'm curious as to any issues that students or faculty had. What constructive feedback did you receive from the surveys?
From the student?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
From the students or from faculty?
Either way, it says students/faculty.
Hannah, do you want to speak to the faculty? I don't know. The students were definitely surprised, like we said. They didn't know how bad it was. I think
Yeah,
they
the
put a lot
students, and like I said, they were mostly pretty positive. I'll say, you know, they're students, so they're not really giving us like, you know, really in-depth feedback. And our forms don't really allow for that as much. So we didn't get a ton of super in-depth feedback. It was mostly like, oh, I didn't realize ChatGPT was that bad, and little comments like that you know, weren't especially enlightening. I did talk to the instructor a little bit after the session that I taught, and she was very positive. And we've taught for her before, so she knows us. She's a frequent library flyer. And so she had generally positive feedback and thought it was interesting. I will say, I don't think she's asked for us to do it again. So take from that what you will. Um, but as far as I know, I mean, I think she did a little thing at the end of couple of the sessions where she asked her students to grade the ChatGPT essays, and I think they all got C's or B minuses, I believe was the decision there. So
And Hannah, I may let you answer this one briefly as well. Someone asked, how did you bring up the use of AI in your instruction session to the faculty you were working with? So how did we talk to them about our idea of using this?
yeah, so we had just talked about it. So the way that we had been doing this last year, we did change things a little bit this year, but last year is when we had composition requests, we had instructors that would go through our form system to request instruction sessions. And then depending on our availability, we would each just take what we have available. And so the four of us each took one of those sections, like I said, and then usually we don't get requests for 2 sessions. Usually there's the one shots, right? So we kind of could do, I reached out to ask her, what do you want us to do for this second session? And she was just very open about it and was like, yeah, whatever you think is best. I just want them to get a little more information literacy. And I know you guys will do a good job. And so I went back to her when we talked about it. We watched the webinar and talked about it, and we wanted to do something AI related. And so I wrote her an email and I explained I think we'd already brainstormed a little bit about what we wanted to do. So we had kind of a firm activity in mind when I reached out to her, but I reached out to her and explained what we wanted and what our goals were, what our learning objectives were. And I asked her if she was okay with it, giving her the option completely to opt out because we could have done something else. And she was all for it. She was like, yeah, I think this is an important topic to talk about. It's, especially I think last spring, because this was very, very new and a lot of the students didn't really know a whole lot about it yet. I think now they're a little bit more aware. But yeah, so I just did it through email. I mean, she just was really nice. So I don't know how to approach that with reluctant faculty. That might be a little harder. But definitely if you've got someone who's a frequent library flyer and likes you and trusts you, it's really not too difficult to kind of get them on board.
Well, and I like the point that Hannah made about us having kind of a concrete activity to propose. I think that can help, especially if you're not sure how an instructor is going to respond, is not just saying, hey, can I do something with AI? Because then their imagination runs wild and they really worry about what that's going to look like. But being able to say, look, here is a specific activity explaining to you how I'm going to use it and why and what the learning outcomes would be. I think that can help a lot to get more buy-in.
There's only about a minute left. Is there another quick question you want to answer?
We don't have any more in the window. I've kind of been answering them in the chat as they come. All right, just getting a lot of thank yous in the chat. So thank you all. We appreciate you coming and listening and participating.
This recording will be made available later, and there's another session starting at 2 o'clock. So enjoy the rest of the conference, everyone.